The restaurant lights were dim, the kind of low golden glow meant to flatter the wealthy and soften their edges. Conversations moved like whispers, careful, deliberate, each one aware of how sound carried too easily across polished marble and glass. Then the door opened. Daiichi Yamamoto stepped inside. He didn't rush, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to shift the air, to command stillness. Every waiter felt it before they even saw him. That subtle tightening in the chest, the instinct that something powerful had entered the room. The kind of power you couldn't measure in money or titles, only in silence. He wore a tailored black suit that looked carved to his frame. His dark hair was slicked back with precision, and a faint line of stubble caught the light each time he moved. There was a gold chain around his neck, simple but deliberate, the kind of detail that hinted at heritage rather than vanity. His eyes, though, those were what stopped people mid-breath. Dark, cold, unreadable, yet holding the weight of entire histories. The maitre d' hurried forward, bowing slightly, his voice trembling despite years of serving the city's elite. "Good evening, Mr. Yamamoto. Your usual table?" Daiichi gave the smallest nod. 2 bodyguards followed him like shadows, silent, eyes scanning every corner of the room. When he reached the far corner booth, leather, private, overlooking the street through tinted glass, the rest of the restaurant seemed to exhale. Forks resumed clinking softly against plates. Music drifted back from the speakers, pretending everything was normal again. But nothing about Daiichi Yamamoto was normal. He set his phone on the table, scrolled through a few messages, then spoke in low, clipped Japanese. "Mizu o kudasai." The nearest waiter froze. Paolo hesitated, confusion flickering in his eyes. Daiichi looked up slowly, and the weight of his gaze made the man step back instinctively. "Mizu," Daiichi repeated, his voice calm but edged with command. "Water." No one moved. The few diners close enough to hear pretended not to, their eyes darting toward their plates. Daiichi's reputation filled every inch of that silence. The stories about men who had crossed him and vanished without a trace. The whispered nickname, Akuma, the demon, and then, from near the service station, a soft voice cut through the air. "Mizu wa sugu ni omochi shimasu," the girl said quietly. "I'll bring the water right away." All eyes turned toward her. She was small, almost forgettable at first glance. Light brown hair pulled into a neat ponytail, a red apron over a simple black shirt. But her voice, calm and steady in fluent Japanese, carried like music through the tension. Daiichi's head turned. His gaze found her instantly, pinning her in place. Emily Carter felt her heart hammering in her chest, but she kept walking. Tray balanced in trembling hands. She poured the glass carefully, not daring to meet his eyes again, yet she could feel them. Heavy, assessing, curious. "You speak Japanese," Daiichi said finally, the words sharp but not unkind. "A little," Emily replied, switching back to English. "I'm still learning." "Why?" The question startled her more than the tone. She hesitated, searching for the truth, because something in his voice told her that lying would be a mistake. "My best friend in college was Japanese," she said softly. "Before she died, she asked me to learn her language. She said it would open doors." Daiichi studied her, the corner of his mouth twitching almost imperceptibly. "And has it?" "Maybe," Emily said. "Depends what's on the other side." For the first time in years, something flickered behind the mask of the demon. Curiosity. Maybe even amusement. He lifted the glass she'd placed before him and took a slow sip. "Your pronunciation is good," he said. "Thank you. I practice alone." "Alone," he echoed quietly, almost to himself. The silence that followed was different now. Not cold, not fearful. It was fragile, electric, alive. For a heartbeat, 2 people from opposite worlds simply looked at each other and recognized something familiar. Loneliness. Paolo hurried back, flustered, whispering harshly, "Emily, don't ever—" But Daiichi raised a hand, stopping him. His voice was smooth again, all authority and composure. "From now on," he said, "she will serve me." Emily blinked, uncertain she'd heard correctly. Paolo stammered, "Sir, she's—" "That wasn't a request," Daiichi interrupted. He turned back to his phone, conversation over. The bodyguards resumed their silent watch. Emily stood frozen for a moment, caught between awe and dread, before retreating to the counter. And as the restaurant tried to pretend the world hadn't just shifted, Daiichi Yamamoto glanced once more toward the girl who had spoken his language. His expression didn't change, but in the depths of those obsidian eyes, something long dormant had stirred. Curiosity. The demon, for the first time in years, felt human. The restaurant had changed for her since that night. Every sound seemed sharper, every whisper heavier. Even the flicker of candlelight carried the echo of his voice she tried to tell. Herself, it was just another customer, just another shift. But deep down, Emily knew nothing about Daiichi. Yamamoto was ordinary. For 3 days he didn't return, and each day the tension in her chest tightened. Paolo warned her again and again to stay, away from him, to forget the man with the black suit and the eyes that saw too much. But the warning only made her wonder more. What kind of man could make an entire room fall silent with one word? Then on the 4th night, he came back. The private entrance opened, and every waiter froze as if a storm had walked in. Daiichi was dressed in dark gray this time, his expression unreadable. 2 bodyguards followed him like shadows. He sat in his usual corner booth, the same booth that still carried the memory of her trembling hands and her broken Japanese. Paolo glanced at Emily, whispering, "You stay out of this tonight. I mean it." But Daiichi's voice carried across the room, calm and clear. Emily Sanchi looked up, heart racing. "Yes, sir, you will. Serve me tonight?" The order left no room for argument. Paolo's shoulders sagged in defeat, and Emily forced herself forward, each step echoing like a heartbeat. She reached the table and poured water, keeping her voice steady. "Good evening, Yamamoto." Daiichi looked at her for a long moment before speaking in Japanese. "Your accent has improved. You practiced?" A faint blush warmed her cheeks a little. She said softly. His gaze softened, barely noticeable to anyone else, but she saw it. She felt it, a small ripple in the calm surface of his control. "Sit with me," he said. "Sir, I have other tables." The command was quiet but absolute. She obeyed, sliding into the seat across from him. The bodyguards watched from a distance. Expressionless, Daiichi leaned, back, studying her as if she were a puzzle that refused to fit. "I had someone look into you," he said suddenly, the words casual but sharp enough to cut. Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" "You are 24, graduated in international relations. Speak 3 languages, your grades excellent, your background clean. No debts except your mother's medical bills, which are now paid." Stomach dropped. What? Has set his phone on the table, the screen showing a hospital account with 0 balance. "I take care of things that interest me." Emily stared at him, a mix of anger and disbelief. "You had no right." Daiichi's eyes met hers, cold, steady. "When people step into my world, I must know if they are a danger to me or to themselves. I'm not in your world. You are now," he said simply. And for the first time, his voice carried something new. Not arrogance, but warning. "Why would you do that? Why pay for something that wasn't your responsibility?" she asked. Daiichi hesitated, then said quietly, "Because you spoke to me like I was human." The words silenced her. He looked away, as if ashamed of the confession in my life. "People fear me, respect me, obey me, but they never talk to me. You did without thinking." Without calculation, Emily felt a strange ache in her chest. She should have felt afraid, but all she could see was the loneliness behind those perfect edges. "You think fear keeps you safe," she said softly, "but it just keeps you alone." Daiichi's eyes flickered with something like surprise. Then amusement. "You're bold for someone who just had her life rewritten. Maybe I've been invisible too long," she whispered. His hand tightened on the edge of the table, just enough for her to see the tension there, his control cracking for a second. Then the mask slipped back into, "Place your friend, the one who taught you Japanese? What was her name? Yuki Tanaka? She died 3 years ago." He nodded. "Grief, recognizing grief. My father was killed 5 years ago," he said quietly, "by people who thought removing him would destroy our empire. They were wrong, and now you ladies and every day since has been a test of how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." Emily's breath caught at the weight of his words. She realized then that this wasn't just conversation. It was an invitation into danger disguised as honesty. The silence stretched until Daiichi finally said, "You will continue to serve me. No one else, do you understand? What if I say no?" His gaze met hers with calm certainty. "Then someone else will be assigned to protect you, and they won't be as gentle as Meso." "This is protection?" she asked. "Or control?" His lips curved slightly. "Both," he stood, signaling the end of the conversation. But before walking away, he looked back and said in perfect English, "You should learn one more word in Japanese, which word Kikandanger." And when he walked out, leaving the room in its familiar hush, Emily finally understood that she hadn't just served a customer that night. She had stepped into a storm that was already beginning to turn in her direction. Rain fell softly against the restaurant windows that night, a steady whisper that seemed to echo the unease in Emily's chest. She had not seen Daiichi in 2 days, but his absence felt heavier than his presence. The staff spoke of him in murmurs, afraid even when he was miles away. Paulo had warned her again to keep her distance. But how could she, when distance was the only thing that made her think of him more? When the door opened and Daiichi stepped in, the rain followed him. His dark suit was untouched by the storm, but there was something different about him tonight. His expression was colder, sharper, the kind of stillness that comes before an earthquake. He walked past the tables without looking at anyone until his gaze found her. She froze, holding a tray, mid-air, the world narrowing to those dark eyes that carried both power and exhaustion. The booth in the corner waited for him. As always, the guards took position, and the room fell silent. Emily forced herself to move. She approached, his table heart thundering. "Good evening." "Yamamoto." Sanhi didn't answer right away, only gestured for her to sit. She hesitated, remembering his last warning about danger. He raised an eyebrow, silently repeating the command she obeyed, slipping into the seat across from him. The candlelight caught the faint bruise on his jaw. It hadn't been there before. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "Business disagreement," he replied in Japanese. "Nothing that concerns you." "It looks painful. I'll get a first aid kit unnecessary," but she was already standing, returning moments later with a small box. She dampened a cotton pad with antiseptic and leaned across the table. This might sting. The moment her fingers touched his skin, everything around them disappeared. Her breath trembled. His jaw clenched, but he didn't pull away. Her hand lingered just a second too long. And in that silence, something shifted between them. "You should not care for me like this," he said, his voice low. "Dangerous." "Why not? Because caring for me is dangerous." He caught her wrist, not hard, just enough to stop her movement, his thumb brushing the pulse that raced under her skin. "You think you understand risk, but you don't. This world will devour anyone who stands too close. Maybe I don't care," she whispered. "Maybe I'm just tired of pretending I don't exist." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw fear. Not of her, but for her. He released her slowly, leaning back as if distance could protect her from what he was. If only it could. They sat in silence until his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. His expression darkened. He spoke rapid Japanese, too fast for her to follow. When he looked back at her, The mask was gone, replaced by something raw. The Takahashi family made their move. He said it's war. No, Emily's chest tightened. War. What does that even mean? It means everything I've built is under threat. It means there will be blood before sunrise. She wanted to say something. Anything. But his phone rang again. He stood abruptly, pulling on his jacket, his movements sharp and precise, the calm before violence. He turned to her. You stay away from the restaurant for a few days. If anyone approaches you about me, call the number I gave you. Don't be brave. Don't try to reason, just call. What's happening to you? Daiichi. He paused at the door, and for a heartbeat his voice softened only for her. I've spent years being the demon they whisper about, but you make me want to be something else that makes me weak. And weakness in my world gets people killed. Then why not walk away? She asked. Because monsters don't get to walk away, he said quietly. They only learn how to love differently. He left before she could respond. His guards following close behind, the heavy doors closing on a gust of rain and silence. Emily stood there motionless, staring at the booth that still carried his warmth. She felt the weight of his warning pressing against her ribs, but beneath the fear was something stronger. A pull. She couldn't name a connection that defied logic. Outside sirens wailed faint and distant somewhere. The city was bleeding, and she knew without a doubt that the man she couldn't stop thinking about was the reason why. That night she dreamed of him not as the demon, but as a man walking through fire, reaching out to her, and for the first time she reached back, the morning after the storm. The city felt different, as if the air itself carried secrets. No one dared to speak. Emily woke to the sound of her phone buzzing 3 missed calls, all from an unknown number. When she finally answered, the line was silent for a moment. Then a voice she would recognize anywhere spoke low and tired. Emily, it's Medaichi. His voice was rough, quieter than she'd ever heard it. She sat up instantly. Are you okay? Silence followed long enough to make her stomach twist. I'm alive, he said finally. But the city isn't. What happened? She whispered. Business. He replied a word that felt far too small for what it meant. Before she could say anything, the line went dead. At the restaurant that evening, the atmosphere was heavy, like everyone was waiting for news they didn't want to hear. Paolo met her at the door. Don't work tonight, he said firmly. Go home. It's not safe. Not safe from what? From whoever's left standing, he replied quietly. But before she could argue, the familiar black car pulled up outside, the reflection of rain streaking down its windows. Daiichi stepped out alone. His suit, immaculate, but his expression unreadable. His guards were gone, replaced by a single presence that filled the space like thunder. He walked straight to her, ignoring the stunned faces of the staff. Emily, we need to talk. Inside the restaurant, the lights dimmed, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He motioned toward the private booth, and she followed every eye in the room, tracking their steps when they sat. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he stared at the untouched table as though trying to remember what peace felt like. What happened to you? She asked. Finally, he exhaled slowly. Last night. The Takahashi family crossed the line. One of my men was killed. Another disappeared. It was a message, and you're responding. I already did. There was no emotion in his voice, just fact, clean, cold, final, the kind of tone that told her he had ordered something that couldn't be undone. You told me not to be afraid of you, she said softly. I never said that, he replied. I said you should be. Their eyes met, and for the first time she saw it clearly. The darkness beneath his calm. The line between control and chaos trembling dangerously. Then why are you here? She asked. To warn you, to protect you, to explain something. I can't ignore his gaze, sharpened last night. They mentioned you by name. They know you exist. They think you're my weakness. He didn't answer. Instead, He reached into his jacket and placed a small velvet pouch on the table. She opened it to find a delicate silver pendant inside, etched with Japanese kanji. She traced the engraving with her finger. "What does it mean?" "Protection?" he said softly. "The symbol was my mother's. It's the only thing she left me before she died. Now it's yours. Daiichi, I can't take. This you can, and you will," he said firmly. "This is the only way I'll sleep tonight." She studied him. The perfect suit, the steady eyes, the flawless exterior. But beneath it all was a man barely holding together the empire built on his father's blood. "You think this will make me safe?" she asked. "Maybe not safe," he said, "but less alone." For a moment the mask cracked. She saw the exhaustion, the guilt, the quiet desperation of a man who had traded his soul for survival. She reached across the table, fingers brushing his hand. "Daiichi, you don't have to do this alone." His jaw tightened. Then he looked up at her with something like surrender. "You still don't understand, Emily. People like me aren't saved. We're endured. Maybe I can change that," she whispered. "Maybe not, but you already have," he said. Their silence stretched until the sound of sirens echoed outside, faint, but rising. Daiichi stood abruptly, pulling her to her feet. "Stay away from windows. Keep your phone close. If anything happens, you call me." "Understood." Before she could respond, he was already walking toward the door. Paulo appeared pale as chalk. "What did he say?" Emily's hand tightened around the pendant that still pulsed warm from his touch. He said, "They know my name." Outside, the sirens grew louder, the night closing in like a promise or a threat, and Emily realized that she had crossed the line between safety and the storm completely. There was no going back. The city felt uneasy that night, like every streetlight was watching, like every shadow had teeth. Emily walked home after her shift with her hood up, gripping the silver pendant Daiichi had given her. It was the only thing that made her feel safe. Even though she knew safety was an illusion in his world, every corner whispered danger. Every sound made her heart race. She had told herself not to text him again, not to fall deeper, but his silence burned louder than words. When she reached her apartment, a sleek black car waited at the curb, tinted windows glistening under the rain. Her pulse quickened. The passenger door opened slowly. Daiichi stepped out, wearing black gloves, and a face that looked carved from stone. "Emily, you shouldn't be outside alone. You shouldn't be here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The neighbors were watching, but he didn't care. He moved closer, the rain clinging to his suit. "You think I'm going to let you walk home in this war zone? I thought you were at your headquarters," she said. His eyes darkened. "It's been compromised. Someone betrayed us. I can't risk you being seen alone." She looked at him, confusion turning to fear. "Daiichi, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're coming with me." Now, she wanted to argue, but something in his tone silenced her. This wasn't a request. This was survival. She followed him into the car, her heart pounding against her ribs. The driver sped through the city streets. Red lights blurring past. Daiichi stared out the window, jaw tight, knuckles pale from the grip on his gloves. Finally, she asked what happened. He hesitated, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. "We found out who leaked the location of my safe houses. Someone close. Someone who saw me with you." He turned his gaze toward her, and for a second she saw guilt there. "You became a target the moment you sat at my table." She swallowed hard. "But why me?" "Because you make me human, and that terrifies them." The car stopped in front of a tall building downtown. Heavily guarded armed men in suits patrolled the entrance. Daiichi took her hand before she could protest. "We're staying here tonight. It's safer than your apartment." Safe didn't feel like the right word inside the building. Marble floors gleamed under white light, but every door was steel, every corner watched by cameras. He led her to a penthouse suite overlooking the entire city. The view was breathtaking, but it felt like a cage. "This is your home," he said. "At least until I end this war, you can't just lock me up here, Daiichi. I have a life. I have a job." He turned to her, his voice sharp. "That life ended the moment they said your name. Do you understand what I've done to keep you breathing?" His words cut deep. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the faint tremor in his hands, the shadow of a man who hadn't slept in days. She took a step closer, her anger melting into worry. "What have you done?" He looked at her, then really looked as if searching for judgment. "I gave them a choice: surrender or burn her breath caught. Did they?" He nodded. "One did, the others won't. But they will learn." For a long moment, neither spoke. Lightning flashed across the skyline, the silence between them humming with tension. She touched his arm. Gently. "You can't fight the whole city," he laughed softly. Not the cold sound she'd heard before, but something bitterly human. "I've been fighting this city my whole life, Emily. The only difference now is that I finally have something to lose." Reached into his coat and pulled out a small black box, placing it on the table. Inside was a ring. Simple silver with a single diamond. "You're giving me jewelry after a death threat. I'm giving you a promise," he said quietly. "If something happens, to me this ring belongs to you. It's my family's symbol. It means loyalty. Until the end. Daiichi, this is insane. So is caring for someone in my world," he said, stepping closer until their breath mingled. "You told me once that fear keeps people alone. Maybe you were right, but maybe love makes the fear worth it." Their voice trembled. "Daiichi, what if we don't survive this?" "Then at least we tried," he whispered. He leaned in his lips, brushing hers just as thunder cracked outside. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate. A collision of danger and desire. A moment stolen from a life that didn't allow moments like this when they finally broke apart. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening. "They've moved again. Another ambush," he said. He grabbed his jacket, heading for the door. She caught his hand. "Promise me you'll come back." He looked at her like a man standing on the edge of two worlds. "I always come back," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Then he was gone, leaving the apartment echoing with silence and rain, and Emily standing by the window clutching the ring, knowing she had just kissed a man who might never return. The city didn't sleep that night. Helicopters hummed faintly above the skyline, and the glow of distant fires painted the clouds a dull orange. Emily stood by the window of the penthouse, clutching the ring Daiichi had given her. She hadn't heard from him in 20 hours, and every minute felt like its own kind of war. She had tried to call him twice. No answer. The television whispered about escalating gang violence, anonymous sources blaming the Yamamoto family. She turned it off, unable to listen. When the elevator chimed, her heart jumped. 2 guards appeared first, scanning the room. Then Daiichi stepped in. He looked like a ghost in a tailored suit, his shirt stained at the collar, his knuckles bruised, his eyes red from exhaustion. "You're hurt," she said, moving toward him. "It's nothing," he muttered, sitting heavily on the couch. Nothing looked like blood on his sleeve. She knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Daiichi, please talk to me." He watched her for a long moment, then sighed like a man too tired to pretend anymore. "We stopped the Takahashi family from pushing further into our territory, but they didn't back down. They're regrouping, and now the police are watching everything we do. We can't afford mistakes." "What about you?" she asked quietly. "When was the last time you slept?" Almost smiled. "Sleep is a luxury for men who aren't hunted." Emily took his hand again, his pulse steady but faintly trembling. "You can't keep doing this. You can't protect everyone by destroying yourself. I've lived this way since I was 28, he said softly. "This is the only way I know. Then maybe it's time to learn a different way, she said. His eyes lifted to hers for the first time. They weren't cold. They were searching. I brought you into this world because I couldn't stand the distance anymore. But now that you're here, I realize what that means. If they find out how much you matter to me, they'll use you. They already have, she said quietly. They used my name to get to you. I've been hiding like a ghost in this apartment. You think that's living? His jaw tightened, the sound of rain against the glass filled the silence. Finally he said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her to a private elevator at the back of the suite. It descended slowly deeper and deeper until the air changed, growing colder when the doors opened. They stepped into a corridor lined with steel doors. Armed guards stood at attention, but none looked at them. Daiichi walked ahead without a word. Emily followed, heart-pounding. "What is this place?" she whispered. "The heart of the Yamamoto Empire," he replied. "My father built it when he took control. Every secret, every deal, every sin is buried here." He opened a heavy door, revealing a massive underground room, maps and monitors covered. The walls, surveillance feeds from every corner of the city flashing across screens, and in the center of the room, a long table where men in dark suits stood waiting when they saw Emily. Their eyes widened. "She shouldn't be here," one of them said. "She's exactly where she needs to be," Daiichi answered. "She's going to see what this life really costs." He turned to her and pressed a button on a remote. One of the screens lit up, showing photographs, rows of numbers and lists. "These are the people who disappeared because of decisions I made, men who challenged our control, women who betrayed our trust. I built peace with fear. Emily, this is what I am." Her breath caught. She saw files marked confidential, pictures of warehouses, bodies erased, names crossed out. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. Daiichi's voice softened. "I wanted you to understand the truth before you decide what you feel for me. Love without truth is just illusion. And what do you want?" Her voice trembled. "I want to stop being this." He said, "I want to rebuild everything, without blood, without shadows. I want to be worthy of the woman who looked at the demon and didn't run." She stepped closer, eyes glistening. "Daiichi, you can't erase your past, but you can change what you become." For a heartbeat, he looked almost hopeful. Then the sound of gunfire erupted from the corridor. Alarms blared. The guards shouted, "Takahashi forces have breached the lower level." Daiichi pulled her behind him. Barking orders in Japanese, locked down the exits. "Get her out!" "Now, no," she cried. "I'm not leaving you." His hand gripped her face, gentle but firm. "You are the only thing they can take from me that matters. I can't lose you. Not now. Not after this." The door burst open. One of his men stumbled in, bleeding. "They're inside." Ichi drew a gun from his jacket, his calm, terrifying in its precision. "Stay down," he said. Bullets ripped through the room. Chaos exploded around them. Emily crouched behind the table, hands over her ears, the noise deafening. She saw Daiichi moving like a shadow, firing twice, 3 times each shot. Deliberate, efficient. He wasn't a man now. He was survival itself. Then silence. The last gunman fell, and the room filled with the sound of rain leaking through the broken ceiling. Daiichi lowered his weapon, breathing hard. He looked back at her, his suit torn, his hand bleeding. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, trembling. He crossed the room, knelt beside her, pressing his forehead to hers. "You see now why I said love in my world is dangerous." She held his face, her voice steady despite the fear. "Then teach me how to survive it." They closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, the demon looked like a man trying to believe redemption was possible. The following night, the city drowned in silence. Not peace, but the kind that comes before violence. Emily hadn't slept. Her hands still shook from the sound of gunfire. From the blood she had seen on Daiichi's sleeve, she kept replaying it, the way he shielded her, the way his voice broke. When he said, "I can't lose you," She sat by the window of the penthouse, watching the sky turn from black to gray. When the door opened, she spun around. Daiichi stood there, bruised, exhausted. His tie gone, his shirt torn, but his eyes still burning with that impossible calm. "They've declared full war," he said quietly. "The Takahashi family joined forces with 2 smaller clans. They want the docks, the warehouses, everything my father built. Then call the police," she said instantly. He almost smiled. "The police are already bought by both sides. They'll watch the city burn and sell protection to whoever wins. So what will you do?" "Fight smarter," he said, "but not the way they expect." He walked to the glass wall, staring out at the city. His reflection looked more like a shadow than a man. "I'm done pretending this war has honor. It doesn't. It's about fear and legacy, and I'm tired of it." He turned to her slowly. "I want you out of the city tonight. My men will take you somewhere safe." No arguments. Emily stepped closer, refusing to back down. "Safe is just another word for alone, and I'm done being alone." He looked at her, the faintest tremor in his control. "You think staying with me is brave? It's suicide. Then teach me how to survive it," she said, her voice steady. "Teach me what you know so I can stand beside you, not behind you." Something in him cracked. He reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand lingering too long. "You don't belong in this world." "Maybe not. But it's the world you live in, and I've already stepped inside." Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. One of his lieutenants spoke rapid Japanese on the other end. Daiichi's face hardened. "Warehouse 17 under attack." "I'm coming," he said sharply. "Stay here. Do not open the door for anyone." She grabbed his hand. "Please come back. Always," he whispered, but the word felt like a promise. He wasn't sure he could keep. Hours passed. Emily paced the floor, the silence worse than any noise, until finally her phone lit up. An unknown number flashed across the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Emily Cartera." A man's voice, deep calm. "Not Daiichi's. You don't know me, but I know who you are." "Who is this?" "Someone who wants you to deliver a message. Tell Daiichi Yamamoto that the Takahashi family doesn't kill women, we trade." Then her blood ran cold. "What?" before she could respond. The line went dead. A knock echoed on the door, followed by another. Harder, louder, she froze. "Miss Carter, it's Kenji Daiichi's second in command. Please open up." She hesitated, staring at the handle. "How do I know it's really you?" "Because your boss just saved my life. Now he's fighting for his own." "Open the door." Her hand shook as she unlocked it. Kenji stepped inside his black jacket, smeared with dirt and blood. "We have to move now." "They've found the building. What about Daiichi?" she asked. "He's holding them off long enough for us to escape, but they won't stop at him." The elevator chimed violently. Alarms blared, red lights flashing. Kenji pulled a gun. "Follow me," he barked. They ran down the emergency stairs, the sound of boots echoing above them when they burst into the alley. The night smelled like smoke, and metal cars burned in the distance. Kenji pushed her into a waiting car. "Get her to the safe zone," he ordered one of the drivers, then turned back toward the chaos. "Wait," she shouted, but the door slammed shut. The car sped away through back streets and tunnels until the city lights disappeared completely. They stopped in a rural compound surrounded by pine trees. The guard outside looked terrified when he saw her. He said nothing, just led her to a room inside a small cabin. Emily sat on the bed, clutching the pendant Daiichi had given her. Hours passed. Then the door opened again this time. It was Daiichi. He was limping but alive. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his chest. He winced, but held her tightly, his breath trembling against her hair. "They're retreating for now," he whispered. "We bought a few days, maybe a week." Her voice broke. "You could have died." "I almost did," he said quietly. "But the thought of you waiting kept me alive." He kissed her, then a slow, desperate kiss like a man coming back from war. But even as he held her, she could feel the tension in his muscles, the way his mind was still on the battlefield. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked out the window at the forest beyond. "Now. We hunt the traitor inside my family. Someone fed them information. Someone who wants me dead. And if you find them," she asked softly, "then I stop being human again," he said. But when he turned back to her, his eyes softened for the first time in years. Someone made the demon hesitate. She touched his face. "You're not a demon, Daiichi. You're a man learning how to fight without losing his soul." He took her hand, pressing it to his heart. "Then I'll fight for that," he said. "And for you." Outside thunder rolled across the sky, warning that the storm was far from over. But in that quiet cabin surrounded by danger and darkness, Emily realized she was no longer afraid she had chosen her side, and nothing could make her turn back now. The next morning the sky was bruised with gray clouds, and the forest outside the cabin felt too still. Emily woke to the faint crackle of a radio and the smell of coffee. Daiichi stood by the window, his shirt half-buttoned, a gun resting on the table beside him. He looked like a man built out of exhaustion and determination. When he turned, his eyes softened just slightly. "You should still be asleep," he said. She sat up, rubbing her eyes hard to sleep when the world feels like it's on fire. He gave a faint smile. "The fire is temporary. The silence afterward is worse." "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we find who betrayed me," he replied. He poured her coffee and handed it over his hands, steady, despite the bruise on his knuckles. "I've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. One of them has been feeding the Takahashi family information since the night of the restaurant shooting," she frowned. "You think it's someone close to you, closer than that?" He said, his gaze drifting out the window. "My father's oldest friend sits on my council. If he's involved, then everything I've built has already started to rot from within, so what are you going to do?" He looked back at her, the demon returning in his expression. "I'm going to invite him to dinner." That night, they returned to the city, driving under cover of rain. The streets shimmered with reflections of neon lights. Daiichi's guards flanked the car, silent and alert. Emily sat beside him, heart pounding. She wanted to speak, but the air between them felt heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. The restaurant he had chosen wasn't just any place, it was Vincenzo's, the place where they had met months ago. The staff greeted him with silent fear. Paulo stood frozen when he saw Emily with him, his face pale as chalk. "Mr. Yamamoto." "Welcome back," he stammered, and "to you, Miss Carter," Emily forced a polite nod. Daiichi's hand brushed hers under the table, reassuring but coldly controlled. Tonight was not about them. It was about power. Within minutes, 3 men arrived, each one a pillar of Daiichi's empire. They bowed respectfully and sat across from him. He poured sake for all 4 of them, the ritual calm and precise. "You all know why we're here." Daiichi began. "Someone within this room has been selling information to our enemies." The men stiffened. The youngest protested. "Impossible. We are loyal. Loyalty is a word," he said softly. "The only truth is proof." He set a small recorder on the table, pressed play, and a voice filled the silence. A voice leaking details about shipments, guards' routes, hidden accounts. The traitor's voice. The blood drained from one man's face. Hiroshi, Daiichi's father's old advisor. His hand trembled. "You're mistaken, Daiichi. Daiichi's tone remained calm, but his eyes were steel. "You told the Takahashi where to find our supply route. You endangered everyone in this family. You've changed," Hiroshi hissed. "You let that woman make you weak," before Emily could react. Daiichi stood, his chair scraping against the floor. The room felt like it was holding its breath. "You call this weakness," he said, his voice low, controlled. "I call it evolution. My father ruled by fear. I will rule by consequence." He turned to one of his guards. "Take him quietly. No police, no spectacle. Hiroshi's eyes widened. Please, I raised you since you were a boy. Daiichi hesitated for a heartbeat then, said softly, and you should have taught me better. The guard dragged him out of the room. The silence that followed felt endless. Emily reached for his hand. Daiichi sat again, his jaw tight, his eyes darker than she had ever seen. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. I did, he replied. Because if I let Mercy show tonight, the others would smell blood. The rest of the meal passed in silence when they finally left the restaurant. The rain had turned to fog. They walked together to the car, but before Daiichi could open the door, a shadow stepped out from the alley. A gun glinted under the streetlight. Emily froze. Daiichi moved faster than thought, pushing her behind him. The shot exploded through the night. His shoulder jerked back, blood blooming. Through his suit, the attacker ran, disappearing into the fog. No, she screamed, catching him before he fell. His breath ragged, his voice hoarse. I'm fine. It missed the lungs. You're bleeding everywhere. Get in the car now, he ordered. The guards pulled him inside, one pressing a towel to the wound as the car sped away. Emily's hands shook the fog outside, turning into streaks of light. Who was that? She asked. Daiichi's voice was fading, one of Hiroshi's men. Maybe both sides. He coughed, blood staining his lip, but his eyes found hers. And despite the pain, he smiled. I told you before, love in my world is dangerous. Stop talking, please, just stay awake. He reached out weakly, his fingers brushing her cheek. You make me want to live long enough to change it. She clutched his hand, tears slipping down her face. Don't you dare die on me. Not after everything. His eyes closed for a moment, his lips parting, to whisper a single word, I, which meant love, as the car raced toward the hidden clinic and sirens wailed somewhere behind them. Emily realized this was no longer about fear or control. It was about survival and the fragile heartbeat of a man who had been called a demon, but was bleeding like anyone else. She pressed his hand against her chest, whispering, You're going to be okay, Daiichi. You have to be, and outside the storm. Began again as if the whole city was holding its breath, waiting to see if the demon of Tokyo would survive the night. The clinic smelled of metal and rain, the kind of smell that lingered long after blood was gone. Emily sat by Daiichi's bedside, his hand cold beneath hers, his face pale against the white sheets. Doctors had already done what they could. The bullet had passed through his shoulder, missing the lung by inches. But he had lost a lot of blood. His bodyguards stood outside the door. Silent as statues, the city outside was drowning in chaos. And yet, inside that room, everything felt painfully still. Hours passed before his eyes finally opened, faintly unfocused. She exhaled a shaky breath. You scared me to death. Daiichi, he tried to speak, but the words came weak and broken. I told you I don't die. Easily, you almost did, she whispered, tears slipping down her face. You almost left me. His fingers brushed her cheek, smearing the tear away. No one's ever waited for me before. Before she could answer, Kenji entered the room, face grim. They hit the harbor. Again we lost 3 men. The Takahashi aren't backing down. Daiichi pushed himself upright, ignoring the pain. I'm going there tonight. Like hell you are. Emily snapped. You can't even stand without bleeding. He gave her a look, half amusement, half exhaustion, and yet his voice carried the weight of command. If I don't go, now they'll think I'm weak, Kenji. Kenji spoke quietly. There's something else. One of our trucks was found burned near the border. They left a message written in Japanese script. It said, the waitress speaks too much. The room went silent. Emily's breath froze. What does that mean? She asked. It means they're coming for you, Daiichi said, his tone changing from calm to deadly. You were seen at the restaurant last night. They want to make an example out of you. Fear spread through her chest, cold and sharp. But before she could speak, he took her face in his hands. Listen to me, Emily. If anything happens to me, you take the silver pendant. Go to the address engraved on the back. You'll find someone named Hana. She'll keep you safe. Promise me no, she said, shaking her head. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a choice, he said, his voice low, desperate. This is survival. She looked at him through tears, then whispered, then teach me how to survive with you. His jaw tightened as if torn between duty and something deeper. Finally, he said, fine, but you do exactly what I say, and you don't look back later that night. The two of them left the clinic under the cover of darkness. Riding in a black car with tinted windows, they arrived at the docks, the air thick with the smell of salt and smoke. Daiichi's men were already waiting. Armed tents and silent lights from cargo ships shimmered against the dark water. The ambush came, fast shadows moving between the containers, bullets slicing the air. Daiichi pulled Emily behind a steel crate. Stay down, he ordered, drawing his weapon. Gunfire erupted, chaos exploding around them. He moved like a predator, fast, precise, every shot measured. She caught glimpses of his eyes, focused, cold, beautiful and terrifying. One of the attackers broke through the line, charging toward them. Daiichi turned, but the man lunged too fast. Emily grabbed a steel pipe, swinging it with all her strength. The sound cracked through the night. The man dropped. She froze, trembling, staring at the weapon in her hands. Daiichi grabbed her, pulling her close, his breath warm against her ear. You're full of surprises. I just saved your life, she whispered. Then we're even, he said. The fight ended minutes later, the dock littered with silence and smoke. Kenji approached. It's done for now. Daiichi nodded, wiping blood from his face, but Emily could see the pain behind the calm. She touched his shoulder. You need rest, he caught her wrist gently later. Right now. I need to end this war once and for all. How he turned to her, eyes dark with resolve, by doing what no one expects. I'll meet the enemy unarmed. Are you insane? She said. They'll kill you. He smiled faintly. They can try before dawn. Daiichi sent a message to the Takahashi leaders, offering a meeting in the old shrine outside the city. They accepted, expecting a trap. He arrived alone, leaving Emily with Kenji, who paced restlessly until she finally said, I'm going after him. You can't. Kenji warned, but she was already gone. The shrine stood on a hill surrounded by fog, the air heavy with rain. Emily approached quietly and saw them. Daiichi, standing before a circle of armed men. His posture calm, his hands empty. You want peace, he said. Then kill me now and end it, or let me rebuild what both our fathers destroyed. One of the men raised his gun. The leader hesitated, watching him closely. You'd die for a woman, they said. No, he answered, for something she made me believe in again. The gun lowered slowly, but before anyone could speak, a single shot rang out from the woods. Daiichi staggered backward, blood blooming across his chest. Emily screamed, running toward him. She dropped to her knees, catching him. Before he hit the ground, his hand found hers, his eyes still burning even through the pain. Don't cry, he whispered. You see now, the demon was capable of love after all. His breathing faltered, his hand slipping from hers. The men around them vanished into the fog, leaving only silence and the sound of her voice breaking as she whispered his name again and again. But deep inside, she refused to believe it was the end, because men like Daiichi Yamamoto didn't die quietly. They rose from ashes and came back for the one thing worth living for: love. The hospital lights were harsh and white and cold. Emily sat in the hallway, her hands stained with blood that wasn't hers, her clothes torn, her face streaked with rain and tears. The doctors had pulled Daiichi from her arms and disappeared into the emergency room, leaving her in silence. The sound of her heartbeat louder than the world around her. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there when Kenji arrived. His face hollow, his coat soaked through. They said he was dead, she whispered, but her voice didn't sound like her own. Kenji shook his head. Not yet, but they don't know if he'll make it. She stood slowly, as if her body had forgotten how to move. Take me to him. Hours later, the machines hummed softly beside his bed. Daiichi, lay still pale in unmoving wires and tubes connecting him to life itself. She reached out, brushing the hair from his forehead, whispering his name over and over until the sound broke. Her days passed. He didn't wake. The news spoke of the end of the Yamamoto empire, of a new syndicate rising from the chaos. The Takahashi family offered a truce, but only under new leadership. They thought Daiichi was gone for good one night. Emily stood by the window of his hospital room staring at the rain. It had become her only constant when she turned back. His fingers twitched just once. She froze. Daiichi. She whispered again, louder. His hand moved this time. His eyelids flickered, and then those dark eyes opened, weak but alive. You came back, she breathed, her voice trembling. He smiled faintly. I told you, demons don't die easily. Tears streamed down her face as she kissed his hand. You almost did. His voice was hoarse but steady. Where is Kenji safe? He said. They've been watching, but I think they believe. You're dead. Good, he said softly. Let them believe it. You can't go back there, Daiichi. You've lost too much. He looked at her, his gaze steady. I haven't lost, you have. She shook her head. Never. Weeks later, when he was strong enough to walk again, they left Tokyo. No bodyguards, no cars, no empire. Only two people who had survived everything. They shouldn't have. The train carried them north through mist and mountains until the city disappeared behind them. They settled in a quiet village by the sea, far from the smoke and the fear. Daiichi opened a small shop repairing fishing boats, his hands scarred but steady. Emily started teaching Japanese to local children. They lived simply quietly. Sometimes she would wake at night to find him, standing outside watching the ocean. One evening, she stepped out beside him, the wind carrying the scent of salt and cedar. He was holding the silver pendant, the one he had given her months ago. He opened it, revealing a new engraving. 2 kanji characters, side by side, A and Shinrai, love and trust. You changed it, she said softly. He nodded. This is who I am now. The man you saw hiding under all the armor. And what about the empire? She asked, his eyes stayed on the horizon. I left it behind. I burned the last of it before we left. No more blood. No more ghosts. And if they come looking for you, then they'll find a fisherman, not a boss. He smiled. And maybe that's the punishment I always needed. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. You once said demons don't die easily. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just learn how to live differently. He turned to her and kissed her slow and deep. The kind of kiss that made time stop, the kind that felt like the end of everything bad that had ever happened. Months later, a letter arrived from Tokyo addressed to Emily. No sender, just a seal in red. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single line in Japanese. It said, "Thank you for taming the demon," signed with one word. Kenji. She smiled and tucked it into a drawer beside the pendant that now shone like silver sunlight years past the world. Forgot the name Daiichi Yamamoto. But in that small seaside town, children grew up hearing stories about a quiet man with scars on his hands who once walked through fire and found peace because a girl refused to be afraid of Haimon. Their anniversary, Emily found him outside again, watching the sea. The sun sinking low. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "Do you still dream of Tokyo?" He smiled. "Sometimes, but only of the night you spoke my language and broke my curse." And as the waves crashed against the rocks below them, Daiichi pulled her closer, his voice low and full of warmth. "I was born a demon, but you taught me how to be human again." She smiled through tears. "You taught me what love means." The wind carried their laughter out to sea, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the ghosts of Tokyo finally faded, leaving behind only peace. The demon and the waitress had rewritten their story, not with blood, but with forgiveness and the courage to start again.